Captain Bennett, turn that aircraft around now, or you will answer for every mile you fly beyond this order. Colonel Nathan Caldwell's voice cut through the headset as rain hammered the windshield and the aircraft pushed toward the black wall of mountains ahead. Captain Claire Bennett kept her eyes forward. Her hands were steady, but nothing about the decision in front of her was simple. Beside her, Chief Warrant Officer Rachel Bennett watched the instruments, then the shifting clouds beyond the glass. The two sisters had already crossed the final navigation point authorized by command. Behind them lay the airfield, their careers, and an order neither woman could pretend she had misunderstood. Ahead, beyond a ridge disappearing beneath the storm, 985 United States Marines were waiting for an extraction command had suspended. Claire, Rachel said quietly. It was not a warning. It was a question only a sister could ask with one word. Claire glanced at the fuel reading, then at the narrow weather opening forming between the ridges. Less than 2 miles across. Maybe minutes from closing. Command had called the route unusable. Rachel had called it temporary. Neither description meant safe. Bennett, acknowledge, Caldwell demanded. Static followed his voice. Claire reached toward the radio but stopped before touching the switch. Through another frequency came a faint transmission, almost buried beneath the weather. Falcon actual to any rescue element. Still holding. Rachel turned the volume higher. The voice returned. Repeat. Still holding. Claire felt those words settle into the cockpit. Not a tactical symbol. Not a number on a screen. A human voice telling anyone who could hear that people were still waiting. Caldwell came back immediately. You do not have authorization to cross that ridge. Return to base. Rachel studied the cloud movement. The opening is shifting northeast. How long? Claire asked. Maybe 6 minutes before the western edge closes. Less if the pressure changes. The aircraft trembled as a gust rolled down from the mountains. Rachel corrected without hesitation. Claire knew exactly what Caldwell saw from operations, weather warnings, limited visibility, a route rejected by the current forecast, and 2 officers moving toward conditions he had already judged unacceptable. He was responsible for every crew he sent into the air. Claire understood that responsibility. That was what made the next choice so heavy. 1 minute to the saddle, Rachel said. The ridge filled the windshield now, dark stone appearing and vanishing behind sheets of cloud. Claire finally keyed the radio. Colonel Caldwell, Bennett Rescue 1 copies your order. A pause. Then turn around. Claire looked at Rachel. Her younger sister did not smile. She did not need encouragement. She simply waited, both hands steady on the controls. Claire looked once more at the navigation display. 985 Marines were somewhere beyond that ridge. She thought about what obedience would protect and what it would leave behind. Captain, Caldwell said, quieter now, this is your last opportunity. Claire removed her hand from the command radio. Understood, sir. She switched the channel off. Caldwell disappeared into silence. Only the steady pulse of the engines remained, joined by rain and the weak transmission from the valley. Rachel looked at her. Claire. Ahead, the opening narrowed another fraction. There would be no committee, no second briefing, no perfect information arriving in time. Whatever happened next would belong to them. Claire tightened her harness and fixed her eyes on the thin passage through the clouds. Take us in. Rachel turned toward the saddle, and the Bennett sisters crossed the ridge alone. 47 minutes earlier, the operations center had been filled with the controlled noise of people still believing the mission could be saved. Rain streaked the reinforced windows while radios murmured beneath the cold fluorescent lights. On the main tactical display, 985 Marines remained inside the valley beyond the western ridge. Their positions appeared as clusters of blue symbols surrounded by terrain, weather, and shrinking options. Claire Bennett stood near the center table, watching 3 planned extraction routes change from amber to red. Rachel. Bennett stood several feet away with a weather tablet in her hands, studying the storm instead of the map. Colonel Nathan Caldwell entered from the communications station and looked immediately toward the largest screen. He had spent the last hour moving aircraft, crews, fuel, and time against a weather system that refused to cooperate. Status, he asked. An operations major answered. Eastern route is closed. Southern approach is below minimum visibility. Western corridor is deteriorating faster than forecast. Caldwell looked at the blue markers. Aircraft available? Full aviation package is staged, sir. Crews are ready. For a moment, nobody spoke. Everything needed for the extraction was sitting less than a mile away on the rain-soaked flight line. The only thing missing was a reliable way through the mountains. Rachel enlarged the western weather layer. Claire noticed immediately. What do you see? Rachel did not answer yet. Caldwell turned toward communications. Any update from Falcon Actual? Static filled the room before a weak voice emerged. Falcon Actual to command. Holding position. Awaiting extraction. Every conversation stopped. The transmission faded, then returned. Confirm estimated arrival. Claire looked toward Caldwell. His expression remained controlled, but his eyes stayed on the manifest count. 985. He understood exactly what his next words meant. Suspend extraction operations, he said. The operations major hesitated. Sir, no aircraft crosses the ridge until we have a viable corridor. Recall anything already airborne. Claire stepped forward. Colonel, they're expecting us. Caldwell faced her. And I am responsible for the crews we send after them. We still have aircraft ready. Aircraft are not the problem. He pointed toward the weather display. The route is. Rachel finally lifted her eyes from the tablet. Maybe not. Caldwell looked at her. Rachel placed the tablet on the table and expanded 2 moving layers of weather data. The lower winds are pushing north. The upper layer is moving northeast. The forecast is averaging both systems across the western saddle. One of the younger operations. Officers frowned. The corridor is still red. Because the model sees the whole area, Rachel said. I am looking at what is happening between the layers. Claire leaned closer. A narrow seam was forming where Rachel had indicated. It was small, unstable, and easy to miss. How long? Claire asked. Rachel watched the latest data refresh. If the pressure holds, maybe 10 minutes. Possibly less. Caldwell studied the same screen. Possibly. Rachel nodded. Yes, sir. I cannot send an aviation package through a possibility. Claire spoke before Rachel could. Then do not send the package. Send 1 aircraft. Caldwell's gaze shifted to her. We cross, verify the route, establish contact, and return. If Rachel is wrong, everyone else stays grounded. The room became quiet enough to hear rain ticking against the windows. Caldwell looked from Claire to Rachel, then back to the 985 blue markers. When he answered, his voice carried no contempt, only the weight of command. Denied. Claire did not move. Caldwell continued. Transmit to Falcon. Extraction is suspended pending a safe route. The radio operator slowly reached for the microphone. Rachel watched the weather display refresh again. The seam widened by a fraction. She leaned toward Claire and spoke so quietly only her sister could hear. It is opening now. The radio operator transmitted the suspension order, and Falcon Actual answered with 2 words that seemed to change the temperature of the room. Copy command. Nothing more followed. No protest. No demand for explanation. Just the disciplined acknowledgement of Marines who had been told that the aircraft they were waiting for were no longer coming. Claire kept her eyes on the tactical display. Rachel remained beside her, watching the narrow seam over the western saddle grow clearer with each update. 8 minutes, Rachel said softly. Claire turned toward Caldwell. Sir, the window is developing exactly where she predicted. Caldwell stepped closer to the weather screen. A developing opening is not a verified route. That is why we verify it. Captain, I already denied the request. Claire held his gaze. The information is changing. And so is the weather. Every 30 seconds. A young operations officer standing near the communications table glanced at Rachel's display. We are talking about sending an aircraft into a mountain corridor because Chief Bennett thinks 2 layers of cloud might separate. Rachel looked at him. Her expression did not change. Not cloud. Wind. The officer folded his arms. The computer says the corridor is closed. The computer is averaging conditions across several miles. The saddle is less than 2 miles wide. So your eyes are better than the entire forecasting system? Rachel shook her head. No. My eyes are looking at a different question. The officer had no immediate answer. Claire almost smiled, but Caldwell stepped between the argument and the decision. Enough. His voice was quiet, and the room obeyed. He looked at Rachel. Chief Bennett, can you guarantee that corridor remains open long enough for entry and return? Rachel answered without hesitation. No, sir. Caldwell nodded. That is the answer I needed. Claire felt frustration rise, but kept it from reaching her voice. Nobody can guarantee mountain weather. Exactly. Which is why I will not put another crew on the far side of that ridge based on a temporary gap. Rachel checked the tablet again. 7 minutes. Caldwell turned toward Claire. Captain Bennett, listen carefully. Every aircraft remains grounded. No crew launches. No one crosses the western ridge without my authorization. That is a direct order. The words settled heavily between them. Claire had spent her entire career understanding what those words meant. Orders were not suggestions. Discipline was not optional when circumstances became difficult. She looked toward the manifest. 985 names sat behind a single number. Then the radio crackled. Command, Falcon Actual. The operator looked toward Caldwell before answering. Falcon Actual, send your traffic. Static washed over the speaker. Weather lifting slightly on our western side. We have visual breaks along the ridge. Rachel's eyes snapped toward Claire. The same opening. Seen from both sides. Falcon continued. Request updated extraction. Status. Caldwell stared at the speaker for a long second. Tell them the suspension remains in effect. The operator obeyed. Claire looked at Rachel. Her sister said nothing until they were outside the main operations room. Then she checked her watch. 6 minutes. Claire walked toward the equipment corridor. How confident are you? Rachel followed. Confident enough to fly it. Not confident enough to promise it will wait for us. Claire stopped beside the window overlooking the flight line. Beyond the rain-streaked glass, the aviation package sat ready beneath white floodlights. Crews stood nearby, grounded only by the order they had just heard. Rachel moved beside her. If we go, it has to be now. Claire watched the western sky. A thin pale break had appeared beneath the storm, almost invisible unless someone knew where to look. Behind them, a door opened. Caldwell's footsteps approached. Captain Bennett. Claire turned. Sir. I know what you are thinking. His expression was firm, but not hostile. Do not confuse conviction with permission. Claire said nothing. Caldwell stepped closer. If you launch that aircraft, you will answer for it. Claire looked once toward Rachel, then back at him. Yes, sir. Caldwell studied her face and understood that she had not promised to stay. Claire reached into the equipment locker and lifted her helmet. Rachel took hers from the shelf beside it. Outside, rain swept across the concrete as the western window continued to open. They had less than 6 minutes. Claire pushed through the exterior door, and cold rain swept across her flight suit before it had fully closed behind them. Rachel stayed at her shoulder as they crossed the wet concrete toward the waiting aircraft. Floodlights turned the rain into silver streaks, and the steady wind carried the smell of fuel and wet pavement across the flight line. Several ground crew members looked up. None of them moved toward another aircraft. Caldwell's order still held every crew on the ground. Only the Bennett sisters kept walking. Staff Sergeant Luke Harris hurried from beneath a maintenance shelter and intercepted them halfway across the ramp. Captain, the aircraft is grounded. Claire stopped. I know. Harris looked from her helmet to Rachel's. Colonel Caldwell gave a direct order. I heard it. For a second, Harris seemed unsure what answer he had expected. Claire continued toward the aircraft. Rachel climbed aboard first and immediately began her checks. Harris followed Claire to the open door. If you start those engines, I have to report it. Claire looked at him, then reported accurately. She climbed inside. 2 officers. 1 aircraft. No one else involved. Harris stared at her, then stepped away. The first systems came alive with a low mechanical hum. Rachel's hands moved across the controls with calm precision. For minutes, she said. Claire fastened her harness. Status. Aircraft ready. weather window still visible. Outside, Harris stood in the rain as the engines deepened. His attention caught on Claire's old flight bag secured beside her seat. Most of a patch had been removed from the canvas years ago, leaving only faded silver stitching in an unfamiliar shape. Harris narrowed his eyes. Something about it felt familiar, but the rising rotor wash forced him back. The command frequency opened. Caldwell's voice filled the cockpit. Bennett Rescue 1, shut down immediately. Claire keyed the microphone. Colonel, we are making one verification flight. You are doing no such thing. You are grounded. If the route fails, we return. No other aircraft launches. That is not your decision. Claire looked through the windshield toward the western sky. The pale opening beneath the clouds was already beginning to shift. No, sir. Caldwell paused, perhaps surprised by the answer. Then shut down. Claire did not respond. Rachel released the brakes. The aircraft began moving across the rain-darkened pavement. Captain Bennett. Caldwell's voice had lost its command room distance. Once you leave this field, there is no misunderstanding what you have done. Claire watched the runway lights slide past. There was never a misunderstanding, sir. Rachel glanced at her sister. 3 minutes. The aircraft accelerated. Behind them, Harris raised one hand against the rotor wash and watched them lift into the storm. Every other aircraft remained exactly where Caldwell had ordered it to remain. In the operations center, officers turned toward the main display as a single symbol separated from the cluster at the airfield and moved west. Caldwell stood motionless beneath the fluorescent lights. He could have ordered another aircraft after them. He did not. Sending a second crew would only multiply the risk he had tried to prevent. Track them, he said. Record everything. Claire and Rachel climbed through 3,000 feet as the airfield lights faded behind the rain. The mountains appeared ahead, dark and immense beneath the weather. Rachel adjusted their heading by several degrees. 2 minutes to the saddle. Claire selected the rescue frequency. Falcon Actual, Bennett Rescue 1. Do you copy? Static. She tried again. Falcon Actual, this is Bennett Rescue 1 approaching from the west. A weak voice finally surfaced. Bennett Rescue 1, Falcon Actual. We hear you. Claire looked at Rachel. The younger sister gave a single nod. Then Caldwell broke through on the command frequency. Captain Bennett, turn that aircraft around now, or you will answer for every mile you fly beyond this order. Claire looked at the ridge filling the windshield. The moment from which there would be no easy return had arrived. The ridge swallowed the last glow of the airfield, and for several seconds there was nothing ahead but cloud, rain, and the pale green instruments reflected across the windshield. Rachel kept both hands steady on the controls. Claire watched the navigation track crawl toward the western saddle. Caldwell's warning remained unanswered in her headset. Then another sound came through the rescue frequency. 3 bursts of static. A pause. 2 more. Claire's fingers tightened against the edge of her seat. She had heard that broken rhythm before. 7 years earlier, another mountain storm had filled another radio with the same empty noise. She had been a younger captain then, standing inside a temporary operations room while commanders waited for authorization to reopen a recovery route. Rachel had been assigned to aviation support. Their older brother, Major Aaron Bennett, had been on the far side of the weather with a small military team waiting for extraction. Aaron had always been the calm one. He had taught Claire how to drive on an empty county road when she was 16. He had taught Rachel to read a compass during family camping trips and laughed when she insisted she could navigate faster than he could. That night, his voice over the radio had sounded almost ordinary. Do not force the weather, he had told them. Find the window. Claire had remembered those words because of what came next. A possible route appeared. Reports were checked. Approval moved upward. Minutes disappeared. By the time authorization arrived, the opening was gone. The team was recovered later, but Aaron did not return with them. No single person had failed him. No rule had been casually ignored. Every decision could be explained. That truth had made the memory harder, not easier. At the memorial, Rachel had stood beside Claire until everyone else left. Then she removed Aaron's old recovery patch from a small envelope and placed it in Claire's palm. If there is still a way, Rachel had said, we keep looking. Claire later stitched the patch onto her flight bag. Years of travel had worn most of it away, leaving only the silver outline Luke Harris had noticed on the flight line. The aircraft shifted beneath another gust, and the memory released her. Rachel glanced sideways. You went somewhere. Claire looked through the windshield. Not far. Rachel understood. She always did. Aaron. Claire nodded once. Ahead, the clouds separated just enough to reveal the dark edge of the saddle. Rachel adjusted their heading. Half a mile. The rescue frequency crackled. Bennett Rescue 1, Falcon Actual. Signal improving. Claire keyed the microphone. Falcon Actual, confirm conditions on your side. Clouds ceiling lifting in sections. Western approach visible from our position. Rachel gave Claire a quick look. Confirmation from the ground. The opening was real. We have your signal, Claire said. Prepare a landing zone and organize the first lift. Falcon hesitated. First lift. Claire looked at the fuel gauge, then at the recorded flight path. Glowing across the navigation display. One aircraft could carry only a small fraction of the Marines waiting below. But that had never been the real purpose of this flight. Affirmative. We are not taking everyone ourselves. Rachel finally cleared the saddle. The valley opened beneath them, dark and wide, dotted with small lights that seemed almost fragile against the mountains. Claire felt the scale of 985 lives in a way no tactical display could reproduce. Rachel began a controlled descent. Now we know the route works. Claire looked at the recorded track behind them. Every turn, every altitude change, every shift in wind. Evidence. Something Command could evaluate instead of guess about. She switched back to the airfield frequency. Command, Bennett Rescue 1. Western Corridor verified. Falcon has visual conditions on this side. We are recording the complete route and returning with the first group. Silence followed. Claire imagined Caldwell standing beneath the operations lights, hearing the report he had hoped was possible but could not responsibly assume. Rachel looked toward the landing lights below. Claire, once we bring them back, this stops being a theory. Claire watched the waiting Marines grow larger beneath them. That is the point. The landing zone emerged from the darkness as a rectangle of white marker lights against the valley floor. Rachel eased the aircraft down while Falcon Actual guided them through the final approach. Wind moved across the open ground in uneven waves, but the route behind them remained visible on the navigation display, every correction recorded. Claire watched rows of Marines waiting beyond the landing area. They were already organized for movement, gear secured, groups counted, no wasted motion. The moment the aircraft settled, Falcon Actual approached the open door. How many can you take? Claire gave him the number approved for the aircraft configuration. Load the first group. We need weight within limits and the turnaround fast. Falcon nodded and immediately signaled his Marines forward. Rachel kept the systems running while Claire checked the recorded route. The Western Corridor had held once. That did not mean it would hold forever. Weather update? Claire asked. Rachel studied the instruments. Still moving northeast. The saddle is stable for now, but I would not build a schedule around it. Claire looked toward the hundreds waiting beyond the lights. We do not need a schedule. We need proof. Minutes later, they lifted from the valley carrying the first group. No celebration followed them into the clouds. Everyone below understood that the real extraction had not yet begun. Rachel followed her own recorded path toward the saddle, matching each turn and altitude correction from the inbound flight. Claire opened the command frequency. Command, Bennett Rescue 1. Returning with recovered personnel. Recorded Western route transmitting now. Caldwell answered after a short pause. Bennett Rescue 1, maintain current track. Report conditions at the saddle. Claire glanced at Rachel. The colonel's tone had changed. The anger was still there, but command had taken over again. Visibility limited but usable. Crosswind increases near the southern edge. Falcon reports the western side remains open. Copy. That was all Caldwell said. The aircraft cleared the ridge. Ahead, the airfield appeared beneath the rain, its runway lights glowing through the gray. Ground crews were already waiting when Rachel landed. The door opened, and the first Marines stepped onto the wet concrete. Across the ramp, Caldwell stood beneath the operations awning. He watched every person leave the aircraft. Claire climbed down last. For several seconds, neither officer moved. Then Caldwell approached. "How repeatable is the route?" Claire pointed toward Rachel, who was already handing the recorded flight data to an operations technician. "Ask the pilot who found it." Caldwell turned. "Chief Bennett." Rachel removed her helmet. "Repeatable with disciplined spacing, sir. The weather is still changing, but we have a verified track now. Send aircraft individually through the saddle, stagger the intervals, and keep the return flow separated." Caldwell looked toward the western ridge. "How long?" "I would reassess continuously, but we have a window now." The distinction mattered. She was not promising 30 minutes or an hour. She was giving him what he had not possessed before: observed conditions and a flown route. Caldwell looked at the Marines who had just returned, then toward the tactical display visible through the operations center windows. 985 had become fewer. Not because a forecast had changed, but because 2 officers had returned with evidence. Caldwell reached for his radio. "Operations, this is Caldwell. Resume extraction. Western Corridor will be the primary route. Use Bennett's recorded track. Launch the aviation package in controlled sequence." Across the flight line, engines began waking almost at once. One aircraft, then another, then another. Rotor lights appeared beneath the rain as crews returned to stations they had never wanted to leave. Claire watched the first rescue aircraft begin moving. Caldwell turned toward her. "Do not mistake this for approval of what you did." "I do not, sir." "You will answer for the order you violated." "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment. "But right now, I need that route." Claire nodded. "Then you have it." Rachel approached with her helmet under one arm. "Our aircraft can turn again in 6 minutes." Caldwell looked at both sisters. "You are volunteering to go back?" Claire looked toward the mountains. "We know the corridor." Caldwell considered that, then gave a single nod. "Get fuel and rejoin the package." Claire turned toward the aircraft. Behind her, Staff Sergeant Luke Harris watched the sisters walk away. His eyes dropped again to the faded silver stitching on Claire's old flight bag. This time the shape stirred a memory. He had seen that symbol before, years earlier, buried inside an archived recovery report. While the rescue aircraft began lifting into the storm, Harris turned toward the maintenance office and started running. Staff Sergeant Luke Harris reached the maintenance office with rain running from his sleeves and the sound of departing aircraft rolling through the walls. He dropped into the chair beside the archive terminal and searched the symbol he had seen stitched into Claire Bennett's old flight bag. The first results were routine unit references. The next were older. Then one record stopped him cold. Bennett Recovery Team. Harris opened it. The report was 7 years old, written in the dry language of military documentation, but the names were unmistakable. Captain Claire Bennett. Chief Warrant Officer Rachel Bennett. Major Aaron Bennett. Harris scrolled slowly. The operation had taken place in mountain weather strikingly similar to the conditions outside. A recovery window had appeared, authorization had moved through command, and by the time approval came, the route had closed. The stranded team was later recovered, but Aaron Bennett had not returned. Harris leaned back. Now he understood the faded patch. He also understood why Claire had walked through the rain after Caldwell's warning without looking back. Another line caught his attention. The senior field commander associated with that earlier operation was Thomas Whitaker. Harris reached for the secure phone. "This is Staff Sergeant Harris at Flight Operations. I need to verify an archived recovery report connected to an active extraction." The duty officer tried to redirect him until Harris gave the names. The tone on the other end changed. The call moved from one desk to another, then upward through headquarters. Captain. Major. Lieutenant Colonel. Each asked some version of the same question. "Where are the Bennett sisters now?" Harris looked through the office window as aircraft lights moved west through the rain. "They are flying the corridor." At Regional Command, Major General Thomas Whitaker was standing over a weather display when an aide approached with the message. Whitaker read the names once. Then again. Claire and Rachel Bennett? Yes, sir. Who authorized their mission? The aide hesitated. Their first flight was not authorized. Colonel Caldwell had suspended the extraction. They crossed the ridge, verified a route, returned with the first group, and Caldwell reopened operations based on the new information. Whitaker's eyes remained on the report. How many are still out there? The count is changing quickly, sir. Multiple aircraft are cycling through now. Whitaker looked toward the western weather map. 7 years disappeared from his face for an instant. He remembered Aaron Bennett standing beside him during an earlier assignment, studying another uncertain route while everyone around them wanted a simple answer. Aaron had once told him that incomplete information could look dangerously similar to certainty when people were tired enough. Whitaker had never forgotten it. He handed the message back. Get me a vehicle. Meanwhile, the rescue operation had become a disciplined chain across the mountains. Aircraft entered the saddle at controlled intervals, descended into the valley, loaded waiting Marines, and returned along the verified track. Claire and Rachel were airborne again, now one crew among many, but every pilot was following the route Rachel had first seen forming between the weather layers. Recovery count? Claire asked. A controller answered over the radio. 417 confirmed at the airfield. Rachel checked the clock. The window is holding better than expected. For now. Claire watched clouds gather along the northern ridge. Below them, another aircraft passed east carrying its next group home. Minutes later, the count climbed again. 532. 608. Each number removed another name from the Valley Manifest. At the airfield, Caldwell stood before the tactical display and coordinated the sequence without leaving his station. He had stopped defending his earlier decision because there was nothing left to defend. The conditions had changed. His responsibility was to change with them. A communications officer approached. Sir, Regional Command is requesting a complete record of Captain Bennett's initial flight. Caldwell nodded. Send everything. My grounding order too. The officer paused. Everything, sir? Caldwell looked at him. Especially that. Outside, headlights appeared beyond the security gate. A command vehicle crossed the rain-darkened pavement and stopped near operations. The rear door opened. Major General Thomas Whitaker stepped out beneath the floodlights, looked toward the aircraft moving against the storm, and asked the officer waiting for him one question. How many are still waiting? Major General Thomas Whitaker entered the operations center as the recovery count passed 800. Nobody announced him. They did not need to. Colonel Nathan Caldwell looked up from the tactical display, came to attention, and immediately pointed toward the western corridor. 821 confirmed back, sir. The aviation package is still cycling. Weather is tightening along the northern edge. Whitaker studied the moving aircraft symbols. How many remain? 164. The general's eyes settled on the lead track running through the saddle. And the Bennetts? Returning to the valley again. Whitaker gave a small nod. No praise. No judgment. Not yet. Out beyond the ridge, Rachel watched the cloud bank descend another few hundred feet. The opening that had once been nearly 2 miles wide had narrowed into a gray passage between darker walls of weather. We are losing it, she said. Claire checked the extraction count transmitted from command. 876. Then 903. Aircraft were moving efficiently now, each arrival timed before the previous crew cleared the return path. Falcon Actual had organized the remaining Marines into final groups before the aircraft touched down. The entire operation had become a race measured in minutes and names. When Claire and Rachel landed again, Falcon was waiting with the manifest. This should be the final group. Claire took the sheet and counted while Marines boarded. The numbers moved quickly. 978. 982. 984. Claire stopped. We are missing one. Falcon checked his copy. His expression tightened. Corporal Matthew Reed. Communications relay position. Where? Rachel asked. Falcon pointed north through the rain. About 1 mile from here, near the old relay tower. He stayed there to maintain contact while we organized the movement. Claire looked toward the slope. Call him. Falcon transmitted. Static answered. He tried again. This time a faint voice came through. Falcon, this is Reed. Claire took the handset. Corporal Reed, Bennett Rescue 1. Confirm your position. Relay tower, ma'am. Prepare for pickup. A pause followed. Captain, you have the others aboard. Weather is closing. I can wait for another option. Claire looked toward Rachel. Rachel checked the fuel, then the weather display. Fuel is sufficient. Weather margin is not generous. Claire keyed the radio. Corporal, there is no final manifest with one name still on it. Mark your position. Reed hesitated. Yes, ma'am. Falcon looked at Claire. I can send coordinates. Do it. Rachel lifted the aircraft from the landing zone and turned north. Below them, a narrow service road curved along the valley floor. The relay tower appeared through the mist less than 2 minutes later. A small white signal light flashed beside it. Rachel brought the aircraft down, and Reed boarded carrying only his communications gear. Claire looked at the manifest and drew one final mark beside his name. 985. Everyone accounted for. She transmitted the words to command. For several seconds, the operations center was completely silent. Then Caldwell exhaled and looked toward Whitaker. The general kept his eyes on the display. Bring them home. Rachel turned toward the western saddle. The return corridor was now barely visible. Cloud rolled across the upper ridge, and the first gray light of morning had begun to spread behind the mountains. This is our last crossing, Rachel said. Claire secured the manifest beside her seat. Then make it a good one. Rachel gave the faintest smile. I usually do. They entered the saddle along the same track that had begun as an unverified possibility less than an hour earlier. When they emerged on the eastern side, the airfield lights appeared through thinning rain. Dozens of people were waiting along the flight line. Rachel landed just after dawn. Corporal Reed stepped down first. Claire followed, carrying the completed manifest. Caldwell stood ahead with a folder in his hand. 2 military police officers waited several feet behind him, not as an arrest detail, but as witnesses to the formal grounding order that would begin the review. Caldwell approached. Captain Bennett, Chief Warrant Officer Bennett, effective immediately, you are grounded. Pending investigation of your unauthorized launch. Claire met his eyes. Understood, sir. Caldwell opened the folder. Before he could continue, a calm voice came from behind him. Colonel, I want the complete record before another word is entered into that finding. Caldwell turned. Major General Thomas Whitaker was walking toward the two sisters. Major General Thomas Whitaker stopped beside Colonel Caldwell and looked first at the completed manifest in Claire's hand. Rainwater still clung to the edges of the paper. 985 names had been checked. Not estimated. Not projected. Accounted for. Whitaker turned toward Caldwell. Colonel, was your original suspension based on the weather information available at the time? Caldwell stood straight. Yes, sir. Did that information indicate the western corridor was unusable? Yes, sir. Whitaker nodded. Then I am not asking you to apologize for making a command decision with the facts you had. Claire glanced at Rachel. This was not the confrontation either sister had expected. Whitaker continued. When Chief Warrant Officer Bennett identified a possible opening, did you consider it verified? No, sir. Was it verified? Caldwell looked toward the aircraft cooling beneath the pale morning sky. Not until they flew it. Whitaker let the answer settle. And after they returned with Marines aboard and a recorded route, I reopened the extraction and launched the aviation package. Because the facts had changed? Caldwell's voice was quieter. Yes, sir. Whitaker looked toward Claire. Captain Bennett, did Colonel Caldwell authorize your first flight? No, sir. Did you understand his order? Completely, sir. And you crossed the ridge anyway? Yes, sir. There was no excuse in her voice. Whitaker studied her for a long moment. Then your decision will be reviewed. Courage does not erase accountability, and good results do not automatically make every choice correct. Claire nodded. Understood, sir. Rachel stood beside her, equally still. Whitaker's eyes dropped to the weathered flight bag hanging near Claire's side. The faded silver stitching was barely visible now. That was Aaron's patch. It was not a question. Claire looked down. Yes, sir. Caldwell's expression shifted. Whitaker stepped closer. Your brother and I served on the same mountain operation 7 years ago. He once told me something I have remembered ever since. Incomplete information can look a lot like certainty when everyone is tired enough. Rachel lowered her eyes for a moment. Claire felt the old memory return, but this time it arrived without the weight of an unfinished promise. Behind them, Corporal Matthew Reed joined Falcon Actual near the flight line. Other Marines were gathering as aircraft unloaded the last equipment and crews shut down their engines. The storm was moving east. Sunlight touched the upper edge of the western ridge. Whitaker looked toward the assembled Marines. 985? Caldwell answered. Everyone on the manifest, sir. Whitaker turned back to the sisters. Then whatever the review decides about that first launch, one fact is already beyond dispute. You found information this command did not have, you proved it, and Colonel Caldwell acted on it. That is why these Marines are standing here instead of waiting in that valley. Claire did not smile. Neither did Rachel. The moment felt too large for celebration. Claire shifted the completed manifest to her left hand, came to attention, and raised a salute to the general. Whitaker returned it with deliberate precision. Then came the quiet sound of boots moving against wet concrete. Falcon Actual had come to attention. Corporal Reed followed. One row of Marines straightened, then another. No one shouted. No one needed to. Across the flight line, hundreds stood beneath the clearing morning sky while the last rotor slowed into silence. Caldwell looked at Claire, then at Rachel. He closed the folder in his hand. Captain Bennett. Claire lowered her salute and faced him. Caldwell paused before speaking. For what it is worth, when the evidence changed, you were right about the corridor. Claire gave a small nod. And when the evidence changed, sir, you sent everyone you had. For the first time that morning, the tension left Caldwell's face. There was no defeated commander standing before them and no triumphant rebel demanding recognition. There were only people who had made different decisions at different moments with different information, and 985 Marines who had come home because someone kept searching long enough to find another way. Claire looked toward Rachel. Her sister followed her gaze to the western ridge, now visible beneath the rising sun. Somewhere in that light lived the memory of Aaron and a promise neither sister needed to carry alone anymore. Orders carried the weight of duty. But when the facts beneath them changed, courage meant having the judgment to see it, the discipline to prove it, and the humility to bring everyone home.